Slytherin Blackpill community. Draco Malfoy had been having what he would later describe as his great awakening for the past 3 weeks. It had started innocently enough, well, as innocently as anything involving Draco could start, with him simply trying to understand why Pansy Parkinson had chosen to go to the Yule Ball with Marcus Flint instead of him. I mean, look at Flint, Draco had muttered to his reflection in the dormitory mirror for the 100th time that morning. He's got the jawline of a troll and the personality of a wet flobberworm. What does he have that I don't? The mirror, which had been enchanted to boost student self-esteem, tried its best. Well, you're quite handsome, dear, and your hair is. Shut up, Draco snapped. I don't want platitudes. I want answers. This had led him down a rather dark path of late-night research in the restricted section of the library, but not the kind of research his professors would have approved of. Instead of studying dark arts texts, Draco had discovered something far more sinister, a collection of muggle self-help books that had somehow found their way into the magical world. The Rational Alpha Male, Alpha Game, The Art of Seduction, Draco had devoured them all with the same intensity he once reserved for Quidditch strategy guides. But it was when he'd stumbled upon some underground muggle internet forums, accessed through a highly illegal magical-to-digital interface charm, that everything had clicked into place. The Black Pill. The truth about female nature. The brutal reality of the sexual marketplace. It all made sense now. Draco had spent the better part of 2 weeks measuring his facial features with calipers he'd stolen from the arithmancy classroom. His canthal tilt was slightly negative, but death sentence in the modern dating world. His jaw, while not terrible, lacked the pronounced square shape that marked true genetic superiority. His wrists were a devastating 6.8 inches in circumference, practically screaming beta genetics to any female within a 50-foot radius. But worst of all, he discovered his fatal flaw. At 5 feet 9 inches, he was below the magical 6-foot threshold that separated the Chads from the Incels. It was over. It had always been over. Crad, he'd said one evening, looking up from his measurements, "How tall are you?" "Dunno," Crab had replied, stuffing another chocolate frog into his mouth. "Tall enough to reach the good snacks on the high shelves." "That's not an answer, you absolute mogger." "What's a mogger?" Draco had sighed. The terminology was wasted on these normies. Crab was probably 6 feet 2 inches without even realizing he was living life on tutorial mode. Meanwhile, Draco was stuck in the genetic lottery's consolation prize category, destined to watch from the sidelines as inferior men with superior bone structure claimed the women that should have been his by right of intelligence and breeding. But Draco Malfoy was nothing if not resourceful. If he couldn't change his genetics, he could at least educate his fellow genetic unfortunates about the brutal reality of their situation. Which is how he'd come to be standing in the Slytherin common room at 11:40 p.m. on a Tuesday, holding a stack of carefully prepared presentation materials and waiting for his audience to arrive. "Gentlemen," he announced to the handful of younger Slytherins who had responded to his cryptic invitation, "please take your seats. Tonight, your eyes will be open to the truth about the sexual marketplace, and why everything you've been told about dating is a lie." Theodore Nott raised his hand. "Draco, is this about why you've been carrying around those weird measuring tools?" "Those weird measuring tools," Draco replied with dignity, "are calipers, and they're essential for accurate facial analysis. But we'll get to that. First, let me ask you all a question. How many of you have been rejected by a girl recently?" Several hands went up reluctantly. "And how many of you have been told that it's because you just need to be more confident or work on your personality?" More hands. "Gentlemen," Draco said, pulling out his first visual aid, a hand-drawn chart that he'd spent 3 hours perfecting, "you've been lied to. Tonight, I'm going to teach you about the 90-10th rule, why looks are everything, and how female hypergamy has destroyed the dating market for subs hate males like ourselves." Goyle, who had been half asleep, suddenly perked up. "Sub-late? Are we talking about potions grades?" "No, you absolute brainlet," Draco said, though not unkindly. "We're talking about the 1 to 10 rating scale for male attractiveness. And I hate to break it to you, but most of us are operating in the 4 to 6 range at best. I thought I was quite handsome, said Blaise Sabini, looking genuinely confused. Draco turned to him with the patient expression of a teacher about to deliver devastating news. Blaise, you're probably a 7, maybe a 7.5 on a good day. But here's the thing, in today's sexual marketplace, even 7s are struggling. Women have been so hypergamous that they only go for chads now. What's a chad? Asked a second year who had wondered in looking lost. Draco's eyes lit up. This was exactly the kind of question he'd been hoping for. He flipped to his next chart, which showed a crude drawing of a square-jawed, tall figure next to a hunched, smaller figure. A chad, he began, is a genetically superior male with hunter eyes, a strong jaw, good height, usually 6 feet 2 inches or above, and the kind of bone structure that makes females lose all rational thought. They're the top 10% of men who are getting all the female attention. He pointed to the smaller figure. This is a beta. Betas are told that personality matters, that they should just be themselves, and that there's someone out there for everyone. But the truth is, betas are just being used for their resources while the women fantasize about chads. That seems rather cynical, not observed. It's not cynical, Theodore. It's realistic. It's the black pill, the final pill that reveals the true nature of female sexuality and the genetic hierarchy that determines our romantic success. Draco pulled out his piece to resistance, a PowerPoint presentation he'd somehow managed to create using a combination of magical copying spells and sheer determination. The title slide read, "The Black Pill, Why It's Over for Subs-Rate Males," in bold, dramatic letters. "Gentlemen," he announced, "welcome to your first lesson in looks-maxing, the sexual marketplace value hierarchy, and why everything you thought you knew about attraction is cope." The presentation began with a slide showing various facial measurements and ratios. As you can see here, Draco continued, pointing with a modified quill, facial aesthetics follow specific mathematical principles. The golden ratio, facial thirds, canthal tilt, these aren't just arbitrary measurements. They're the biological markers that determine whether you're a chad, a normie, or, well, let's just say you might want to start developing other interests. Goyle raised his hand. "What if we don't want to measure our faces?" "Then you're blue-pilled," Draco replied matter-of-factly. "You're living in denial about your genetic reality. Look, I know this is hard to hear, but ignorance isn't bliss when you're wondering why that Hufflepuff girl chose to go out with a Ravenclaw instead of you." The next slide showed a pyramid diagram labeled the sexual marketplace hierarchy. At the top was a small section labeled the chads, top 10%, followed by larger sections for high-tier normies, mid-tier normies, low-tier normies, and at the bottom, a section that simply read "It's over." Now, where do you think most of us fall on this pyramid? Draco asked. "Hopefully not the bottom," muttered a third year. "Hope is cope," Draco replied. "We need to be realistic about our SMV, that sexual market value, and understand that in the current dating environment, even average-looking guys are struggling to compete." He clicked to the next slide, which showed a graph with the title "Female Hypergamy Through the Ages." The line showed a dramatic upward trend in recent years. "You see, gentlemen, female hypergamy, that's women's tendency to seek partners of higher social and genetic status, has been accelerated by modern dating culture. Women can now easily access the top 10% of men, so why would they settle for anything less?" "But what about personality?" asked Nott, who was clearly struggling with these concepts. Draco's expression grew serious. "Theodore, that's the biggest cope of all. Personality matters is what they tell sub-3 males to keep us participating in a rigged system. The truth is, personality only matters if you meet the minimum looks threshold. If you're ugly, your personality is irrelevant. If you're good-looking, your personality is automatically assumed to be great." He flipped to a slide titled "The Halo Effect in Action." This is why Marcus Flint, despite having the conversational skills of a brick wall, can date successfully while intelligent, cultured gentlemen like ourselves are relegated to the friend zone or complete invisibility. The room had grown quiet as the younger students absorbed this information. Draco could see he was making an impact. "Now," he continued, "I know this is a lot to process. You're probably experiencing what we call black pill grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. But once you accept the truth about genetic determinism and female nature, you can stop wasting time on futile pursuits and focus on other aspects of life. "So what do we do?" asked Goyle, who had been surprisingly attentive throughout the presentation. "Well," Draco said, brightening slightly, "there are a few options. First, you can try looks maxing, improving your appearance through various means. Skincare, exercise, better clothing, maybe even some minor cosmetic procedures if you're desperate enough." He flipped to a slide showing before and after photos he'd found in one of his research materials. But let's be honest, looks maxing can only take you so far. If you're a 4, you might be able to become a 5 or 6 with significant effort. But you're never going to Chad Max unless you have the bone structure for it. What's the second option? Not asked. MGTOWE men going their own way. Basically, you accept that the dating market is rigged and focus on other pursuits. Money, career, hobbies, whatever. You opt out of the whole system. And the third option? Draco's expression grew darker. Well, there's always the possibility of ascending through other means. Status maxing, money maxing, dark triad game, basically exploiting the few remaining weaknesses in female psychology to overcome genetic disadvantages. He clicked to his final slide, which simply read, "The choice is yours." "Gentlemen," Draco concluded, "I can't make this decision for you. But I can give you the tools to see reality clearly. The Blackpill isn't comfortable, but it's the truth. And the truth, as they say, will set you free." The room sat in stunned silence for a moment before a first year raised his hand tentatively. "Draco, is this why you've been so angry lately?" Draco considered the question seriously. "I'm not angry," he said finally. "I'm enlightened. There's a difference. Anger is what you feel when you still believe the system is fair. Enlightenment is what you feel when you realize it never was. But don't you think maybe not began?" "No," Draco cut him off. "No more coping, no more blue pill thinking. The data doesn't lie. The bone structure doesn't lie. The rejection doesn't lie. Everything else is just cope." He began packing up his presentation materials with the satisfaction of someone who had just delivered an important truth to the masses. "Same time next week, gentlemen. Next session, we'll be covering the importance of height maxing and why prey eyes are a death sentence in the modern dating world." As the younger students filed out, looking dazed and somewhat traumatized, Draco couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. He'd planted the seeds of truth in their minds. Soon, they too would understand the brutal reality of genetic determinism and female hypergamy. It was, he reflected, probably the most important educational service anyone had ever provided at Hogwarts. Even if the professors would never understand its value.